Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for inviting me here today to talk to everyone. I really appreciate it. This is my first time talking at this event, and it's nice to see so many people show up for it. So, yeah, as Victoria mentioned, my talk is called Artful Insights, Sketching as a Tool for Eliciting Information and Cues to Deceit. So before I jump into the kind of main part of the talk, where I just want to tell you about a couple of experiments, I'll just briefly talk about my research a little bit. So my main area of focus is around investigative interviewing. So typically, my colleagues and I, my students and I, we look at how to get detailed and accurate information from witnesses, victims, and suspects. And so the deception part of my work is, so I've done a few studies on it, but the main part kind of revolves around the investigative interviewing part. So I'll talk about a couple of studies that touch on those areas today. So as a lot of you, I'm sure, are aware, but just to kind of make sure we're all on the same page, interviewing witnesses, victims, and suspects, it's a core component of policing. So police officers were likely not present when a crime was committed, and so they need to find out what happened from the people that were there. So the information that's obtained during an interview, it helps the police with really important tasks, such as advancing their investigation or ultimately laying charges. So given the significance of investigative interviews, a lot of research has been conducted over the past 30 years to develop different tools and techniques to enhance, the interviewee's memory for criminal events. So the cognitive interview is the current gold standard for interviewing. And so essentially it's a comprehensive interviewing protocol that emerged from the science on memories, how they're stored and retrieved, and so on. A bit more practically speaking, the cognitive interview is a toolkit for interviewers to use when conducting interviews. So one of the techniques that's part of the cognitive interview toolkit that has been gaining a little bit of attention recently is something called sketching. It should be kind of, obvious what sketching involves just from its name, but typically what happens during an interview is that an interviewer will ask an interviewee to basically draw out the components of the event that they witnessed or experienced, while also providing a verbal account. So to give you a better idea about what sketching kind of looks like in practice, I'll just show you a brief video clip from an interview where someone used the sketching technique and basically talked and drew at the same time.
The event that happened in the pharmacy. So the way the pharmacy was set up, there were two doors on the same wall. One of them was used for patients to drop off their prescriptions, so there was a line up there. And the other one, was a desk set up right beside it with the pharmacist, and he was checking the prescriptions once they were filled.
So as you can see, we're not really focused on people's artistic ability. It's just a way to kind of get those memories out there, use it as kind of an external storage mechanism, and it just provides a great way for people to get detailed and accurate information out to the interviewer. So in terms of some of our previous research on sketching and research conducted by other researchers, we've basically found, or what the research shows, is that sketching helps to elicit detailed and accurate information from people. And one of the great things about it as well is that it's quick and easy to implement. So one of the things with sketching is not resource intensive. A lot of people can do it. And it's something that we can easily implement during an interview. So one of the great parts of being a researcher and our jobs is that we get to kind of test the bounds of these things. So we can find out that they work, great. So now let's figure out how far we can kind of push these things and see when they stop working or when they work the best. So what I want to do is briefly kind of give a whistle-stop tour about two experiments. So the first experiment we just conducted basically on pure information gathering. And then the second one I'll talk about an experiment I was involved in where we looked at the use of sketching for detecting deception. So the first experiment that I want to talk about is called measuring the effectiveness of the sketch procedure for recalling details of a live interactive event. Sorry, I know it's a bit of a mouthful, but the reason that we wanted to do this study is that a lot of the previous research on sketching use kind of a mock crime video. So participants would come into the lab, they would know that, they're watching this video, they're going to be asked about it later. And so we wanted to kind of change things up and use a live interactive event and see if sketching would still kind of be helpful for that. So again, trying to mirror more of the real world context or setting. And so what's, kind of neat to note about this is that, the interaction that we eventually asked participants about, they were unaware that they would be asked about it later. So they weren't trying to purposefully encode the event. So basically what we did, we invited participants into the lab. So we brought them into a conference room. So the research assistant welcomed them into the conference room. They mentioned that the experimenter was running late and just asked the participant, grab a seat. And what they would do is fill out a demographics questionnaire while they waited for the experimenter. So the research assistant then mentioned that it was the wrong form. They got up and they grabbed a different form and asked them to fill that out. When they did, the participant then deposited the form into a tray on the other side of the room. Then what happened is that the research assistant spilled over a cup of water, asked the participant to go grab some paper towels and help them clean it up. After that, the research assistant received a phone call from the experimenter saying that when they were going to arrive type of thing. They asked the participant to do fill out some more information on a computer. And then they said that they got a text from the experimenter and then sent them out to the room. So this was the interaction that we asked them about. So we had movements, we had conversations, we had kind of a main event to talk about. So again, it's not exactly mimicking what they would see in the real world criminal context, but something a bit more realistic than just kind of watching a mock crime video. So in terms of the live interaction, on average, it lasted for just under 6 minutes. And because every interaction was slightly different, which was a lot of fun for coding, we ended up with around 206 to 278 details. So that was the range that we were dealing with that participants could recall a little bit later on. So what we did, we interviewed participants about that experience, and we had 3 different recall conditions. So we had a control where we just asked them a plain open-ended question, tell me about everything that happens in the room with a research assistant. We used what's called MRC, so mental reinstatement of context. This is a way that we can kind of prompt the senses, and has been shown to get a lot of detailed and accurate information from people as well. So things like sight and smell and what you heard. So it was really trying to mentally recreate that context or that event for the witness. And then finally, we used the sketch procedure. So we would just ask participants to draw out what happened and then talk about it while they were drawing. And so I'm just going to focus on some key results because I don't want to take up too much time and talk about all the nitty-gritty stuff. But basically, we hypothesized that those who recalled using the sketch procedure would recall more information and more correct information than those just ask the open-ended question, and we would find a large effect. So we also thought that those in the sketch procedure would recall more than those in the mental reinstatement of context. Again, just based on past research, and we thought this would be a moderate effect based on what the literature has showed previously. So here you can see our results in terms of the mean number of correct details recalled by participants. Let's see if I can get my pointer to work. So here we have the control condition. People just ask the open-ended question, mental reinstatement of context, and then the sketch procedure. And what we saw is that there was a large effect in the difference in recall between those that were asked to recall using the sketch procedure versus the control condition. So we see a large effect size here, a D of 1.31. And so while not statistically significant, we still saw a medium effect here in terms of the difference in the number of correct details recalled between the sketch and MRC procedure. And then finally, again, while not statistically significant, we did find a medium effect here between the MRC and the control condition. Okay, so that was a brief bit on experiment one. And so experiment two, I was kindly asked to collaborate on this research with Haneen Deeb, and I believe she's in the audience. So basically, yeah, so Haneen and her lovely colleagues, Sharon, Samantha, Mark, and Paranders, we wanted to look at sketching routes to elicit information and cues to deceit. So why is the question you might be asking. So sometimes investigators may want information on a specific route that is kind of central to the event in question. They may want to ask about different activities that happen on the route as well. So in such instances, investigators may ask suspects for a self-generated sketch. They may provide them with a printed map, or they can just, provide a free recall of it. So researchers in the past, they have examined the effects of, self-generated sketches on information elicitation, like I briefly talked about earlier, and lie detection as well, but they haven't yet explored the impacts of the printed maps in terms of what types of details that would lead to. So what we wanted to do with this experiment is to compare the effects of the different modalities. And so I'll tell you what that looks like. So basically, we had a veracity condition. So participants would either be told to tell the truth or to lie when they were interviewed about what they did later on. And then we had three different recall modality conditions. So we had the self-generated sketch where people would just sketch out a map themselves about where they went and what they did. In the printed map condition, participants were provided with a printed map, and then they could, trace their routes on the map and then talk about what they did. And then we had a simple free recall condition where they didn't sketch or didn't provide any kind of visual cues for that. In terms of the main dependent variables, we looked for things like complications. So things in the story that indicated that things wouldn't go as planned, like, I wanted to go to the shop, but there was a long queue there. So that's kind of a complication to how a story would go. Verifiable sources as well. So one of the big things for police investigations is they need to look for checkable and verifiable information so they can, advance their investigations. And then we looked at the types of details. So this is just an acronym for the different types. So the people, location, action, time, and object details. So again, I won't go into all the hypotheses and the results. I'll just stick to some of the key ones, the highlights here. So what we thought is that the printed map condition would elicit more complications, would elicit more verifiable sources and more types of the Plato details than the self-generated sketch and the free recall condition. And in terms of the kind of magnitude with these, the differences between these three modalities, that we thought that the difference between liars and truth tellers will be more pronounced in the printed map condition, and the smallest details or smallest differences, sorry, will be observed in the free recall condition. So in terms of the procedure and what kind of participants did, basically they read an instruction sheet informing them that they're going to carry out a mission as an undercover agent. And what they had to do was deliver a secret envelope that included what they were told was coded information about a double agent. So the mission involved them buying an item from a shop near the department where the study took place. They had to take a photo of the item that they purchased and a receipt. And then they had to send the photo along with the secret code to the agent by phone. So then the participants took either one of two routes back to the department, and then they were going to be interviewed about it later on. So unfortunately, we didn't find a main effect of modality. So this is the different types of interview techniques that were used. So self-generated sketch, printed map, or free recall without sketch. But we did conduct planned separate truth-lie orthogonal contrast for each modality condition. And you're probably wondering, what does that mean? What does that look like? So let's talk about it. So in terms of the printed map condition, so truth tellers relative or compared to liars provided more complications, verifiable sources, and different more location, action, temporal, and object details. And we see the effect sizes range from medium to large here. In the self-generated sketch, truth tellers again provided significantly more complications, verifiable sources, and different types of details as well. We see a similar kind of trend here with slightly larger effect sizes. And then finally, in terms of the free recall condition, truth tellers again, so we kind of see this trend, this main effect of veracity. Truth tellers provided more complications and verifiable sources and all the different types of details. So in terms of examining kind of the magnitude of the differences, contrary to what we thought was going to happen, the self-generated sketch actually resulted in the largest difference between truth tellers and lie tellers. So we see a large effect size. And this was actually followed by the free recall condition and then the printed map condition. So it really kind of flipped in terms of what we thought we would observe versus what we actually observed. Okay, so in terms of just a couple of take-home messages, and then I promise I will stop talking. So previous research has shown that sketching helps the interviewee provide detailed and accurate information. It helps to kind of elicit cues that distinguish truth tellers from liars. And finally, I didn't talk about this in this talk, but happy to answer questions about it. It also helps the interviewer to better understand the interviewee's account. So we develop all these tools and techniques to get more information, but it's not really been looked at a whole lot in terms of how this impacts the interviewer. So it's good because it helps the interviewee provide a lot of information, but it also helps the interviewer to understand that information. So thank you, everyone, for coming out. Again, sorry, very quick overview of some research that we've done, and happy to answer questions later on in this session.